I know what it feels like to build something with your own hands and watch the man you raise treat it like it's his to break. The company I started in my garage now has 73 employees in a building downtown. My son runs the floor. He's got a corner office and a title that sounds important. But yesterday he called me into his office, closed the door, and told me my input was no longer needed. He didn't ask. He told. He doesn't know I still own the building. He doesn't know the deed is in my name. He doesn't know the lease expires in 30 days. That man is me. My name is David Croft. I built Croft Construction from a pickup truck and a circular saw 30 years ago. It's now the largest independent contractor in 3 counties. My son, Jason, has been running operations for the last 6 years. And as of yesterday afternoon, he has decided I am in the way. This is not just a story about a father and a son. This is about a silent crisis that destroys 70% of family businesses before the second generation ever gets to run them. The question no one wants to answer: what happens when the founder holds the deed and the heir only holds the attitude? July of 1994. I was 31 years old, sitting in a Ford F-150 with 200,000 miles on it, and I had exactly one contract in my pocket. A single-car garage foundation for a man who paid me in cash and told me not to mess it up. That garage became a house. That house became a subdivision. And by 2005, Croft Construction had 12 crews running across 3 counties, and I had a son who was 15 years old and wanted to know everything about what I did. Jason was sharp. He had my eye for angles and his mother's patience for people. When he graduated high school, he told me he wanted to work for the company. I said no. I told him to get a degree first, something outside construction, learn how businesses actually work. He went to Western Kentucky University, studied finance, came back 4 years later, and I put him in the field, not the office. I wanted him to know what a concrete form felt like at 6 in the morning in January. He lasted 2 years on the cruise. Then he came to me with a plan, not a request, a 40-page document with market analysis, cost projections, and a proposal to run the residential division. I read it. It was good, so I gave him the division. That was 2012. By 2016, Jason had tripled our residential revenue. He had a reputation. Clients asked for him by name. My subs respected him. And I made the decision that so many founders make at exactly the wrong time. I promoted him to operations director. I stayed on as owner and president. And I told myself I was doing the smart thing. Let him run the day-to-day. I would handle the big picture. That arrangement works for exactly 3 years. Then something shifted. The first sign was small. A subcontractor called me directly about a change order. I told him to run it through Jason. He said, "Mr. Croft, I tried. Your son told me to submit it in writing and wait 2 weeks. I've got a crew sitting idle. I need an answer today." I called Jason. He said, "Dad, that's how we do it now. Process, not personality." He was right, but I overrode him anyway. I told the sub to go ahead. Jason didn't say anything, but I saw his jaw tight. That was 2019. Over the next 4 years, the pattern repeated. A foreman with 20 years of experience got let go because he missed a safety meeting. I hired him back. A bid that came in under our margin got rejected by Jason because it was too aggressive. I signed it anyway. Every time I stepped in, I was solving a problem. Every time, Jason saw it as a veto. He stopped asking for my opinion. He stopped sending me reports. He started treating me like a liability. The research numbers back up exactly what happened. The Kellogg School of Management has studied this. When founders transition to chairman but continue to cross the line into management, it creates what they call role ambiguity. Employees stop knowing who to listen to. The chain of command blurs, and the successor starts to feel like a figurehead rather than a leader. 60% of family business failures trace back to this specific conflict. Not market conditions, not bad products. A father who can't stop fixing things, and a son who can't stand being fixed. 6 weeks ago, the roof started leaking. Literally. The building we occupy, the one I own, had a section of flat roof that had been patched 3 times. I called a commercial roofer I know. Got a quote. Sent it to Jason with a note saying I would handle it. He wrote back, "I already have a roofer. Don't involve yourself in facility maintenance." I drove to the office that afternoon. I walked past the receptionist, past the conference room where I once drew the first blueprint for this company on a napkin, and into Jason's corner office. He was on the phone. He held up a finger. I stood there for 45 seconds while he finished his call. Then he looked at me and said, "What do you need, Dad?" I told him the roof needed to be done before the next rain. He said he had it under control. I said the roofer I used had done work for me for 15 years. He said, "The roofer I hired has a contract. We're committed." I asked to see the contract. He pulled it up on his screen. It was a national chain, 3 times the cost, 8 weeks out on scheduling. I lost my temper. I don't do that often, but I told him that was a bad decision and I wasn't going to let him waste company money on it. He stood up. He said, "You made me operations director. You told me to run this company. I am running it. And you are undermining me in front of employees every time you do something like this. If you want to be the boss, be the boss. Take the title back. But if you want me to do the job, let me do the job." I didn't have an answer, so I walked out. That was 6 weeks ago. Since then, he has excluded me from every management meeting. He changed the locks on the file room. He told my assistant of 12 years that she no longer reported to me. And yesterday, he called me into his office and told me my input was no longer needed. He said it calmly. He said the company needed a single decision maker, and it wasn't going to be me. I sat in my truck in the parking lot for 20 minutes. Then I drove home, went into my home office, and opened the filing cabinet. In the back behind the tax returns, there is a manila envelope. Inside is the original deed to the property, the building we occupy, the one with the leaking roof. I bought that land in 2000. I paid off the mortgage in 2015. Jason does not know. He has never asked who owns the building. He assumed the company owns it. The company leases it from me. I own the company, but the lease is separate. That lease expires in 30 days, and I have not yet signed the renewal. Jason is preparing for a board meeting next week. He thinks he's going to present a 5-year growth plan that consolidates his control and pushes me into an advisory role with no teeth. He has a slide deck, a consultant, and a lawyer waiting in the wings. He thinks he has one. He has not seen the deed. I sat in my home office with the deed in my hands for a long time, not thinking about what to do. I already knew what I could do. I was thinking about what it would cost, not in dollars, in everything else. The deed is clear. I own the land and the building outright. The company operates under a commercial lease signed in 2015, renewable annually with a 30-day notice clause. I wrote that clause myself. I put it in there because I wanted flexibility. I never thought I would use it against my son. I called my attorney the next morning. Her name is Ellen Vance. She has handled Croft Construction's legal work since 1998. She knows the company better than anyone except me. I told her I needed a meeting. She said, "Is this about Jason?" I said, "It's about the lease." She paused. Then she said, "Come in at 3. Ellen's office is in an old brick building on Main Street. I have been in that conference room 100 times, closing deals, settling disputes, signing the papers that built everything I have. This time was different. I walked in, sat down, and put the deed on the table. Ellen looked at it, then at me. She is 64 years old, with gray hair cut short and the kind of eyes that have seen every version of human failure in a small town. She said, "Tell me exactly what happened." I told her the roof, the meeting, the locks, the words he said to me. "Your input is no longer needed." She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and said, "David, I need you to hear something that is going to be hard to hear. You created this, not the company, the situation. You gave him the authority but kept the power. That is a recipe for exactly what happened. The research backs it up. McKinsey did a study. When founders stay on as chairman and keep overriding management decisions, the successor either leaves or rebels. Jason chose to rebel. She was right. I knew she was right, but knowing it did not make it easier to hear. I asked her what my options were. She laid them out one by one. Option 1. Sign the lease renewal, step back completely, give Jason the ownership he thinks he deserves. Option 2. Refuse to renew, force the company to relocate, take control of the building and use it as leverage to reassert my authority. Option 3. Sell the building, take the capital, and let the company figure out its own space. Each option had consequences. Option 1 meant I lose everything I built. Option 2 means I burn my relationship with my son beyond repair. Option 3 means I cash out and walk away from the legacy. I told her I needed time to think. She said, "You have 29 days." I left her office and walked to the diner. Earl was already there. He had heard through the grapevine that something was happening. Small towns do not have secrets, just varying levels of delay. I sat across from him and ordered coffee. He said, "You look like a man who just found out his insurance lapsed." I told him about the meeting with Ellen. He listened, sipped his coffee, and then said something that stopped me cold. He said, "Did you ask Jason why he did it?" I said, "He told me yesterday. He said the company needed a single decision maker." Earl shook his head. "That is what he said. That is not why he did it. You raised that boy. You know the difference between a reason and a justification. Go find out the reason." I did not want to. I wanted to be angry. Anger is easier than understanding. But Earl was right. He usually is. The next day I drove to the office, not to confront Jason, to talk. I walked past the receptionist who looked at me like I was a ghost. I knocked on Jason's door. He said, "Come in." He was at his desk reading something on his screen. He looked up and his face changed. He was bracing for a fight. I said, "I'm not here to argue. I want to understand." He stared at me for a long moment. Then he closed his laptop and said, "Sit down." I sat, and he told me something I did not know, something that changed everything. He said the company was in trouble, not critical, but serious. We had lost 3 major bids in the last year. Our margins were tightening. 2 of our best project managers had left for competitors, and the bank had called him last month to say that our line of credit was under review because our debt-to-equity ratio had slipped below their threshold. He had been trying to fix it without telling me because he did not want me to worry. And every time I stepped in and overrode his decisions, it undermined his ability to manage the crisis. The subcontractor I overrode. He had been trying to enforce cost controls. The bid I signed. It was below margin because I did not see the updated numbers. The roof. The national chain was more expensive, but they had a warranty that the bank required for the property insurance. I asked why he did not just tell me. He said, "Because every time I tell you something is wrong, you fix it yourself. You do not trust me to fix it, and I cannot run a company if you do not trust me." I sat there with the weight of the deed in my pocket and the weight of his words in my chest. He was not wrong. I had not trusted him. I had given him a title and then treated him like an intern with a corner office. That is the killer in family business. Research from Wharton says it clearly. The founder equates the business with their identity. Every problem feels like a personal failure, so they cannot let go. And the heir, left without real authority, either becomes a puppet or a rebel. Jason chose rebel. But there was more. He had not told me everything. I asked about the bank. He hesitated. Then he opened a drawer and pulled out a letter. It was from First National Bank, dated 2 weeks ago. It said that due to the company's financial position, they were reducing the credit line by 40% effective immediately. That meant we could not cover payroll for the next 2 commercial projects unless we found alternative financing. He had been trying to secure a private lender. He had not told me because he was afraid I would step in, call my contacts, and solve it the way I always do. I asked, "Did you find a lender?" He said, "I found one, but there is a condition." He turned his screen around. On it was a proposal from a private equity firm called Riverton Capital. They were offering a bridge loan at 8% interest. In exchange, they wanted a board seat and the right of first refusal on any future equity offering. It was a lifeline, but it came with a leash. I looked at the proposal. Then I looked at my son, and I realized that I had a choice to make. I could pull out the deed, tell him I own the building, and use that leverage to force him to cancel the Riverton deal. I could take back control and save the company the way I always have. But if I did that, I would confirm everything he believed about me. That I do not trust him, that I will never let go, and he would be right. Or I could let him make his own mistake. I could let him sign the deal with Riverton, watch him struggle, and step in when it failed. That is the revenge version. The one where I let him hang himself and then rescue the company on my terms. It would be satisfying, but it would destroy him. I told him I needed to think. He said, "The board meeting is in 6 days. I am presenting the Riverton deal. I need your support, or at least your silence." I walked out of his office. The deed was still in my pocket, and I still did not know what I was going to do. That night I could not sleep. I went through the company's financial statements, the ones Jason had sent me, the ones I had not looked at closely in over a year. The numbers were worse than he had said. Our gross margin had dropped from 22% to 14%. Our backlog was down by a third, and the line of credit reduction meant we had about 90 days of operating cash left. I called Ellen the next morning. I told her about Riverton Capital. She said, "I know them. They are vultures. They do bridge loans to family businesses in distress, then they force a sale or a restructuring within 18 months. If Jason signs that deal, he will lose the company within 2 years." I asked if there was another way. She said, "Yes, you own the building free and clear. You could offer the company a better lease deal or inject capital as a shareholder loan, but that requires you to take an active role again, which is exactly what Jason does not want." So there it was, the choice I had been avoiding. I could let Jason sign with the vultures and lose the company, or I could take control back and lose my son, or I could find a third path, one that did not end in destruction. I started making calls. I talked to my banker, a man named Henry who had handled my personal accounts for 20 years. I asked him about refinancing the building. He said the property was worth about $1.2 million. I could take out a mortgage for up to 70% of that, roughly $800,000, enough to cover the credit line gap and give the company breathing room. The catch: the loan would be in my name, not the company's. That meant I would be the lender. Jason would be reporting to me. I told Henry to prepare the paperwork. Then I called Jason and asked him to meet me at the diner, not the office, neutral ground. He walked in looking exhausted. He had not been sleeping either. I ordered coffee for both of us. Then I laid it out. I told him about the building, about the deed, about the lease that expires in 23 days. He stared at me. He said, "You own the building." I said, "Yes." He said, "All these years you never told me." I said, "I did not think I needed to." He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "So you could kick us out anytime you wanted." I said, "I could, but I am not going to. I am going to do something else." I told him about the refinancing. $800,000, a personal loan from me to the company at 4% interest, half of what Riverton was offering. No board seat, no equity, just a loan with a repayment schedule and a condition. He stays as operations director, I stay as owner. We set up a formal governance structure, a family council, a clear separation of roles. He makes operational decisions, I make ownership decisions. And we get a third-party mediator to help us draw the line. He looked at me like I had grown a second head. "You would do that after everything," I said. "I built this company for you, not to control you. I just forgot that somewhere along the way." He did not say yes. He did not say no. He said he needed to think. I told him he had 23 days. He got up, left a $5 bill on the table, and walked out. I sat there alone, the coffee growing cold. The deed was still in my pocket, but for the first time in months, I was not thinking about what I could take away. I was thinking about what I could build, and whether there was enough time left to build it together. 2 days passed. I did not hear from Jason. I left 3 messages. He did not return any of them. I drove past the office once, saw his truck in the parking lot and kept driving. I told myself I was giving him space. The truth is, I was afraid of what he might say. On the third day, Earl called me. He said he had been at the feed store and heard something that did not sit right. A man from Riverton Capital had been seen at the county records office pulling property records, specifically the deed to the building. I hung up and called Ellen. She confirmed it. The private equity firm had done a title search. They knew I owned the building, and if they knew, Jason knew. I drove to the office. I did not knock. I opened Jason's door and found him on the phone. He looked at me, said, "I have to call you back," and hung up. I said, "You knew about the deed before the diner." He did not deny it. He said, "I found out 3 weeks ago. A title search for the insurance audit turned it up. I was going to confront you about it, then you told me yourself." I asked why he did not tell me he knew. He said, "Because I wanted to see if you would use it. If you would pull the lever." I asked what he had decided about the Riverton deal. He said, "I signed it yesterday." The room went cold. I said, "I offered you $800,000 at 4%. No board seat, no equity. You signed with vultures instead." He said, "You offered me a loan with conditions, a governance structure, a mediator. That is still you controlling me. Riverton gives me the money and a seat at the table. I keep my authority. You keep your building. It is clean." I said, "It is not clean. It is a leash. They will own you within 2 years." He said, "Maybe, but at least I will have tried to run my own company." I walked out. I did not go home. I went to the building, the one I own, and walked through it. I looked at the walls I had framed, the floors I had poured, the roof that still leaked. I thought about every nail, every contract, every 16-hour day. And I realized I had 2 choices. I could let him fail, or I could fight him for the building, force the company to relocate, and watch everything I built collapse in a legal war that would bleed us both dry. I called Ellen. I told her what happened. She said, "David, there is something you need to know. Riverton did not just do a title search. They also ran a lien search. They found a mechanic's lien from 2018 that was never fully discharged. It is for $52,000. That lien means the building title is clouded. You cannot refinance it until it is cleared, and the company is the one that owes the money." I said, "I paid that lien. I have the receipt." She said, "You paid the contractor. The contractor did not pay his supplier. The supplier filed a lien against the property, not the company. It is still active, and it gives Riverton leverage. They can force a sale to satisfy the lien. They can use it to push Jason into a restructuring." I sat down. I had paid the contractor in good faith. He had stolen the money and skipped town. I did not know about the supplier until now. That was 2018. 4 years before I had a heart condition, before I updated my will, before Jason took over. It was a forgotten mistake that had just become a loaded weapon. I asked Ellen what I could do. She said, "You can pay off the supplier directly, get a release of lien, and clear the title. That is $52,000 plus interest and penalties. Call it $64,000. But you need to do it before Riverton files a motion to force a sale. And you need to do it without Jason knowing, because if he finds out, he might use it to negotiate a better deal with Riverton." I told her to start the paperwork. Then I called my banker, Henry, and asked about a personal line of credit. He said I could have $65,000 by end of business tomorrow. I said, "Do it." That night I sat on my porch and watched the dark come down. The moths hit the light. The dog barked somewhere down the road. And I thought about the math. $64,000 to clear the lien. $800,000 to refinance the building. 4% interest. A loan to a company that was now controlled by a private equity firm that wanted to strip it for parts. I would be lending money to the people who were going to destroy my son. Unless I stopped them first. I called Earl. I said, "I need you to go to the board meeting with me." He said, "I thought you were not going." I said, "I changed my mind." He said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I am going to tell Jason the truth, all of it, the deed, the lien, the refinance. And then I am going to give him one last choice." Earl was quiet. Then he said, "You sure about this?" I said, "No, but I am out of time." The board meeting was set for Thursday at 9:00 a.m. I spent the next 3 days working with Ellen to clear the lien. The supplier was a small outfit in Bowling Green. The owner remembered me. He said, "David, I thought you knew. I sent you 3 letters." I told him I never got them. He said, "They went to the company address. Your son signed for them." I stopped breathing. I said, "Jason signed for the lien notices." He said, "Yes, 3 of them over 2 years. He never forwarded them to you." I asked if he still had copies. He said he did. He faxed them to Ellen's office within the hour. I held the fax in my hands. My son had known about the lien. He had hidden it from me for 2 years. He had let it sit there, a time bomb, while he negotiated with Riverton. And when I offered him a clean loan, he signed with the people who could use that lien to destroy both of us, because he would rather burn the company down than let me save it. I called Ellen. I said, "Does Riverton know about the lien?" She said, "They did the title search. They know. They have not filed anything yet. They are waiting, probably until after the board meeting when Jason thinks he has one." I said, "Then we file the release of lien first thing Thursday morning, before the meeting. I want the title clean before Jason walks into that room." She said, "David, if you do that, Riverton will know you are moving against them. They will accelerate their timeline. They will force a board vote on the restructuring immediately." I said, "I know." Thursday morning, 7:30 a.m. I met Ellen at the county courthouse. We filed the release of lien. The title was clean. I owned the building free and clear. No cloud, no leverage for Riverton. I walked out of the courthouse with the certified document in my hand and drove to the office. Earl was waiting in the parking lot. He was wearing his good jacket. He said, "You look like a man about to start a war." I said, "I am about to end one." We walked in together. The receptionist did not try to stop us. The conference room door was closed. I opened it. Jason was at the head of the table. 3 Riverton representatives were seated on one side, an empty chair on the other side for me, my seat, the one Jason had not offered me to sit in. He looked up. He saw the document in my hand. He knew what it was. I set it on the table. I said, "The lien is cleared. The title is clean. I own this building, and I am prepared to offer the company a new lease. No Riverton, no vultures, just a father who wants his son to stop fighting long enough to see what he almost lost." The Riverton lead, a woman in a gray suit, picked up the document and read it. She set it down. She looked at Jason. "You did not disclose the lien to us. That is a material omission in your application. We will need to reconsider our position." Jason looked at me. His face was unreadable. I did not know whether he was going to thank me or throw me out. The room waited, and I realized the hardest part was still ahead. Not the legal fight, not the money. The hardest part was whether my son would recognize a rescue when he saw one, or whether he had already decided that winning meant beating me, no matter what he lost in the process. Jason did not look at the Riverton representative. He looked at me. The room was silent. I could hear the clock on the wall, the one I had hung there 20 years ago when I was still running meetings myself. It ticked. 9 seconds. 10. Then Jason spoke. He said, "Everyone out except my father." The Riverton woman started to protest. Jason held up his hand. "This is a private conversation. You can wait in the hall." She hesitated. Then she and her 2 associates stood and left. The door clicked shut behind them. Earl looked at me. I nodded. He stepped out too. It was just Jason and me in the room I had built, at the table where I had signed the contracts that made everything possible. He sat down. I sat down across from him. He pushed the certified release of lien toward me but did not let go of it. "You cleared the lien," he said. "You paid the supplier after I hid it from you for 2 years." "I did." "Why? I lied to you. I signed with Riverton behind your back. I tried to take the company from you." I looked at my son. He was 36 years old. He had gray at his temples that had not been there 5 years ago. He had the same jaw I had at his age, the same stubborn set to his mouth. And he had the same fear I had never admitted to myself, the fear that he was not enough. I said, because you are my son, and I spent 15 years teaching you how to build things, but I never taught you how to trust someone who loves you. That is my failure, not yours. He blinked. He did not expect that. Neither did I, honestly. I had not planned to say it, but it was true. He said, I signed the Riverton deal because I thought it was the only way to prove I did not need you. I hid the lien because I was ashamed. I thought if you knew I had let it slip, you would use it to take control back. And I was right. You did use it. You used it to save me. I said, I used it to save the company. You are the one who has to decide what happens next. We sat in silence for a long moment. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder. He slid it across the table. It was the Riverton Agreement, signed, dated yesterday. He said, I called my lawyer this morning, before I came here. I asked him if there was a way to back out. He said there is a 72-hour rescission clause. I can cancel the agreement until Friday at noon. He looked at me. It is Thursday. I have 30 hours. I asked, what do you want to do? He said, I want to take your loan, the $800,000, the 4%, the governance structure, the mediator. I want to do it your way, but I need you to promise me one thing. Name it. He looked down at the table, then back up. Stop treating me like I am going to break. I know I made mistakes. I know I hid things, but I have been running this company for 6 years. I have kept it alive through a pandemic, a labor shortage, and a market downturn. I am not a child. I am not a failed employee. I am your partner, and I need you to see me that way. I sat with that. The research I had read, the numbers from Wharton and Kellogg, they all said the same thing. The founder who cannot let go kills the successor long before the market does. I had read the articles. I had nodded along, but hearing my son say it out loud was different. I said, you are right. He blinked. What? You are right. I have treated you like a liability instead of a leader. I gave you the title, but I kept the keys. That was wrong. I do not know if I can change overnight, but I am willing to try if you are willing to meet me halfway. He nodded. Then he stood up, walked to the door, and opened it. The Riverton team was standing in the hallway. Earl was leaning against the wall. Jason said, I am exercising the rescission clause. The deal is canceled. You will receive formal notice from my attorney within the hour. The Riverton woman looked at me, then at Jason. She said, you are making a mistake. Jason said, probably, but it is my mistake to make. She left. Her associates followed. Earl shook his head and smiled. He said, I am going to get coffee. You two have work to do. He walked off. Jason closed the door and turned to me. So, what does the governance structure look like? I pulled out the notes I had scratched on a napkin the night before. Family council meets quarterly. Ownership decisions stay with me until I transfer the shares. Operational decisions stay with you. Any dispute goes to a third-party mediator before either of us can make a unilateral call. We put it in writing. We both sign it. He read the napkin. He laughed. You wrote this on a napkin from the diner. It is how I started the company. Felt appropriate. He shook his head, but he was smiling, a real smile, the first one I had seen from him in months. We spent the next 4 hours in that conference room. We called Ellen. We called Jason's attorney. We drafted a term sheet. The loan was structured as a shareholder note secured by the building at 4% interest with a 5-year term. The governance charter was based on a template Ellen had used for 3 other family businesses. We added a clause about the board seat. I would hold it until the loan was repaid. Then it would transfer to Jason. A path, a timeline, a way out for both of us. By 2:00 p.m., we had a signed document. Jason canceled the Riverton agreement by certified email. I wired the first $200,000 from my personal line of credit to cover the immediate cash crunch. The company payroll was secure. The projects were back on track. That evening, Jason came to my house. He brought a 6-pack of beer and a pizza. We sat on the porch, the same porch where I had sat alone 6 weeks ago, holding the deed and wondering if I was about to destroy everything I loved. The sun was going down behind the ridge, the same porch, different man. He said, "I have been thinking about what you said, about teaching me to build but not to trust." Uncomfortable thought. Extremely. He took a drink of his beer. "I think I knew about the lien for 2 years because I was afraid of what would happen if you found out. But I was also afraid of what would happen if I fixed it myself. Because if I fixed it, I would have to admit that I could run the company. And if I could run the company, then I would have to stop blaming you for holding me back." I said, "That is a lot of thinking for a guy who once told me a framing nailer was complicated." He laughed. "I was 17, I did not know anything." "You still don't, but you are learning." We sat there until the pizza was gone and the beers were empty. The moths came to the porch light. The dog barked somewhere down the road. And the leaks in the roof of the building were getting patched tomorrow by a crew that Jason had hired that afternoon. A local crew, the one I had recommended. The final surprising detail came 3 days later. A letter arrived at my house, hand-delivered, no return address. I opened it. It was a handwritten note from Jason's mother, my ex-wife, whom I had not spoken to in 22 years. She had heard about the company trouble through someone in town. She wrote that she was proud of me, and she was proud of Jason, and she was sorry she had not been there. She included a check for $10,000 with a note that said, "For the roof." I did not cash the check. I framed it and hung it in the conference room, next to the first blueprint I had ever drawn. It reminded me that sometimes the people who leave still want to see you stand, and sometimes the people who stay need you to let them stand on their own. Jason is running the company now, not as my operations director, as my partner. The governance charter is in place. The family council meets quarterly. The mediator is on retainer, and I sit in a different chair in the conference room, not at the head of the table but next to my son. The deed is still in my filing cabinet, but I have started the paperwork to transfer the building to the company, slowly, over time, the right way. Because a building owned by one man is just a building. A building owned by the people who work in it is a foundation. That was 6 months ago. The roof is fixed, the payroll is stable, and the governance charter is no longer a document we pull out when there is trouble. It is how we operate. Every quarter, Jason and I sit down with the mediator, not because we are fighting, because we learned that the only way to keep a family business alive is to talk about the hard things before they become the impossible ones. The statistics have not changed. 70% of family businesses still fail by the second generation. 30% make it to the third. Ours might beat the odds or it might not. But we are no longer the statistic that gets cited in business school case studies about founders who could not let go. We are the one that figured out how to build a bridge while standing on opposite sides of the crack. I still own the building, but last month I transferred 20% of the shares to Jason. Another 20 will transfer next year. The rest will follow over time, tied to milestones we agreed on together. It is not a gift. It is a plan. The kind of plan I should have made 15 years ago. The hardest part was not the legal work or the money. It was the moment I had to look at my son and admit that my fear of losing control was going to cost me the one thing I could not replace. A lot of founders never get that moment. They die with the deed in one hand and the silence in the other. I am 63 years old. I have gray hair and a heart condition and a framed check on the wall from a woman I have not spoken to in 22 years. But I also have a son who calls me every week to ask my opinion, not because he has to, but because he wants to. And I have learned to give it once and then let go. That is the part they do not teach you in business school. The part about knowing when to hold the line and when to hand it over. The part about trusting someone enough to let them fail without letting them fall. The part about building something that lasts longer than your own 2 hands can hold. If you have watched this far, you probably have someone in your life like Jason, or you are Jason, Or you are the founder sitting on a deed you have never shown your kids. The question is not whether you will face this moment. The question is what you will do when it arrives, because it will arrive. And the only thing that matters is whether you are ready to open your hands. Thanks for watching. If this story meant something to you, let me know in the comments. And if you know someone who needs to hear it, send it to them. Because some conversations are too important to wait until the lease runs out.